Welcome to Libyth. There is a surface to the Taiheiki, and there is what lies beneath it, and the two are not the same thing, and both matter. On the surface, the text is a chronicle. 40 chapters of battles, councils, sieges, retreats, deaths, political maneuvers, diplomatic missions, betrayals, and ceremonies spread across nearly 50 years of Japanese history. It names people and places. It describes what happened. It moves forward in time. If you read it only at this level, you get an extraordinarily detailed picture of the Nanboku-cho period, a record that historians still consult and debate, a document that is genuinely primary for understanding one of the most turbulent periods in Japanese history. This surface is real, and it repays close attention. But the Taiheiki is not only, or even primarily interested in that surface. Underneath the chronicle of events, underneath the catalog of names and battles and deaths, the text is conducting a continuous investigation into a question it never asks directly. What is it that makes power legitimate? Not just in Japan, not just in the 14th century, but in any political order. What is the foundation on which authority rests? And what happens when that foundation is contested or lost? The Nanboku-cho conflict is the historical occasion for this investigation, but the investigation reaches beyond it. The text is asking something about the nature of political life itself, and it is asking in a way that refuses easy answers. The question becomes sharpest around the fact of two courts. Japan, during the period the Taiheiki covers, had two emperors. Not a disputed succession, not a question of which claimant would prevail, but two simultaneously functioning imperial courts, each performing the rituals of sovereignty, each making appointments, each claiming the divine descent and the sacred legitimacy that defined the imperial institution. This was not supposed to be possible. The entire political and cosmological order of Japan rested on the assumption of a single imperial line, a single locus of divine authority from which all legitimate power derived. When Go-Daigo established the southern court in Yashino, and Ashikaga Takoji installed a rival emperor in Kyoto, they did not just create a political crisis. They created a cosmological one. If there are two emperors, then either one of them is not really an emperor, or the framework that defined what an emperor was has broken. Neither option is tolerable to the system that depended on that framework. The Taiheiki takes a clear position. The southern court is legitimate, the northern court is not. Go-Daigo is the true emperor. The Ashikaga-backed claimant in Kyoto is a pretender. This is the moral position of the text, and it shapes everything about how the narrative is organized, who is honored, who is condemned, whose deaths are mourned, and whose victories are recorded with something like distaste. But the text's moral position does not resolve the philosophical problem it has identified. The question of what makes one emperor legitimate and another not cannot be answered simply by asserting which side you are on. Legitimacy is not a property that adheres to a person by virtue of birth alone, though birth matters enormously in this system. It also requires ritual authority, the performance of the rites that sustain the cosmic order. It requires practical power, the ability to defend and administer. It requires recognition, the acknowledgement of other powerful actors that this person is who they claim to be. The Nanboku-cho conflict splits all three of these requirements across the two courts, and the Taiheiki cannot resolve the split, because history itself did not resolve it. The Northern Court won. Its descendants rule Japan to this day. The text that insisted on the Southern court's legitimacy is therefore a permanent dissent, a moral argument that history overruled but did not refute. The Buddhist layer of the text operates alongside this political investigation without resolving it. Buddhism and the question of legitimate power are not, in the Taiheiki's world, separate concerns. The text is saturated with Buddhist imagery, Buddhist ceremony, Buddhist interpretation of events. Battles are preceded by prayers. Deaths are followed by rites. The great moments of fall, the collapse of the Hojo, the destruction of the Kenmu restoration, the military reverses of the Southern court, are all legible through the Buddhist framework of impermanence and the suffering caused by attachment. What the warriors of the Taiheiki are attached to is power, and the suffering their attachment produces is proportional to the intensity of that attachment. The Hojo held power for a century, and then lost it entirely, in a single collapse that destroyed not just their political authority, but their physical existence. The attachment was total, and the loss was total. But Buddhist impermanence, pushed far enough, becomes something that could undermine the text's political commitments. If all power is impermanent, if attachment to authority is the source of suffering, then why does it matter which court is legitimate? Why mourn the defeat of the Southern court, if defeat is the inevitable fate of all earthly power? The Taiheiki does not answer this question, and I think it does not answer it because it genuinely cannot reconcile its Buddhist cosmology with its political loyalties. The text wants to say both that the Southern court was right and that worldly power is an illusion, and these two positions do not fit together easily. What it does instead is hold both simultaneously, allowing the tension between them to generate the text's characteristic emotional register, a kind of committed mourning, a grief that insists on meaning even in the face of a cosmological framework that refuses to guarantee it. The Confucian layer runs parallel to the Buddhist one, and the two interact in ways that are sometimes complementary and sometimes in tension. Where Buddhism provides the framework of impermanence and the critique of attachment, Confucianism provides the framework of hierarchy and the ideal of loyalty. In the Confucian view, the social order is a moral order. The relationships between father and son, lord and vassal, ruler and subject are not merely conventional but cosmological. They are the human reflection, the structure of heaven. When these relationships are properly observed, when sons are filial, vassals are loyal, rulers are benevolent, the cosmos is in order and things go well. When they are violated, when lowers overcome uppers, when the loyal are betrayed, when the ruler acts from personal interest rather than cosmic responsibility, chaos follows. The Taiheiki reads the Nanboku-cho conflict as a Confucian catastrophe, a period in which all the proper relationships were simultaneously violated, in which the social fabric dissolved into competing claims and counterclaims, in which loyalty became impossible to distinguish from treachery, because the object of loyalty itself had split in two. The Chinese historiographical tradition that also shapes the Taiheiki is the tradition of praise and blame. The idea that the historian's job is not neutrality but moral judgment, that the selection of what to include, what to omit, how to describe each event, how to render each person's speech, is an act of ethical evaluation. The Taiheiki inherits this tradition from its engagement with Chinese dynastic history and Chinese political philosophy. Its narrative choices are moral choices. When it gives Kusunoki Masashide's final farewell to his son in detail and renders Ashikaga Takoji's victories in compressed, almost administrative prose, It is making a judgment. When it lingers over the deaths of loyal men and moves quickly past the political achievements of pragmatists, it is encoding praise and blame in the structure of the narrative itself. You do not need to be told that Kusunoki is admirable and Takoji is suspect. The text tells you through the texture of its attention. The comparison to the tale of the Heike is inevitable and illuminating. Both texts are Gunki Monogatari. Both deal with periods of civil war. Both honor losers and treat victory with ambivalence. But the emotional register of the two texts is different in a way that reveals something about what the Taiheiki is actually doing. The Heike is suffused with with the Buddhist sense of the pathos of impermanence, the melancholy beauty of things that pass. It mourns the Terra with a grief that is almost aesthetic, a sorrow at the loss of beauty and refinement, of the court culture that the warrior class destroyed when it came to power. The Taiheiki mourns differently. Its grief is more political, more insistent. It mourns not the beauty of what was lost, but the justice of what should have been. Where the Heike weeps, the Taiheiki protests. And protest is a different relationship to loss than weeping. It implies that things could and should have been otherwise, that the outcome was not inevitable, that someone made a mistake and the universe should acknowledge it. This distinction matters for understanding the Taiheiki's legacy. In the Edo period, domain lords studied the text because they found in it a systematic treatment of political legitimacy, institutional loyalty, and the consequences of governance failures. They were not wrong to read it that way. The text genuinely encodes these lessons, even if encoding them was not its primary intent. In the Meiji period and after, nationalists found in it the image of Kusunoki Masashige as the ideal of imperial loyalty, a man who died for his emperor without reservation, whose devotion was complete and pure. They were also not entirely wrong, but they were reading selectively, taking the loyalty without the tragedy, the devotion without the critique of the emperor who wasted it. The Taiheiki contains both, and to read it fully is to hold both, to see Kusunoki's loyalty as admirable and as catastrophic, to see Go-Daigo's cause as right and as ruinous, to see the political order the text defends as genuinely valuable and as genuinely doomed. What the Taiheiki offers a reader now, in the 21st century, is something harder to name than historical information or literary pleasure, though it provides both. It offers a model of thinking about legitimacy, about what makes authority real, what makes it fragile, what happens when the systems through which authority is recognized and maintained begin to fail. The 14th century in Japan is not a mirror of any particular contemporary crisis. But the questions it raises: what happens when two authorities both claim to be the only legitimate one? What happens when loyalty becomes impossible to fulfill? What happens when the institutional order that people have organized their lives around stops working? Are questions that have not stopped being relevant. The Taiheiki does not answer them. It is too honest for that. But it thinks about them with a depth and a patience that few texts can match. And that depth is available to any reader willing to stay with it long enough to feel the weight of what it is carrying. That's all for today on Libyth. One new book every week. At least we try.